It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Property Podcast. It is episode 89 and today we've got a fantastic episode that I'm sure has attracted probably people who've never listened to the podcast before, Rob. But more on that very soon. Rob, what have we got coming up?
Yep, this week we've got 20 ways to become a property millionaire. And if that doesn't keep you listening, nothing will. But we've also got news, we've got resources of the week and all sorts of other bits. Lots to pack in. And Rob, you've been packing in a fair bit this past week, haven't you?
Well, we both have, Rob. So in last week, we talked about a launch of the mastermind sessions, the Property Hub Summit, but we were talking in the past about something we were doing in the future, and it's all confusing. But now we're in the future and we can talk about the past. Does that make sense?
Let's say it does, yes.
So let's just go with it. Okay, so January Summit has sold out. Fantastic. Thank you. We're so looking forward to working with the 20 people who are joining us for that event on January the 4th. But because of the demand and because it's oversold, we've actually launched an event in March as well. The date for that is the 14th of March. So if you've not listened to last week's episode on why masterminds are fantastic and how you can set one up, I might add. So we don't just tell you why they're fantastic and then say, come to us. We tell you how to do it yourself. But if you want to join Rob and I and you and then 19 other switched on investors on March the 14th, which is a Saturday, then please go to thepropertyhub.net/summit and see if there's any places left for March. Last week we were saying see if there's any places for January. They've gone. Probably next week we'll be telling you March is nearly sold out, if not sold out. So if you are keen, make sure you go to that now and grab your place because it is strictly limited to 20 people. We will not take any more on. It's going to be a nice, close-knit affair. So hopefully you, dear listener, will be joining us then. So Rob, new story of the week, and it turns out us landlords ain't so bad after all.
Yeah, so this is something that we've been saying for a while, and because there was all those stories a while back about what Labour were proposing to regulate landlords if they got in, and there's all kinds of stuff, and as always painting landlords as the villain of the piece. But a new piece of research, which you normally have to take this research with a pinch of salt and have a look at who's actually commissioned it. But in this case, it's a home insurance company. You don't seem to have any particular agenda. And the research says that landlords are actually more ethical than many give them credit for. So apparently 77% of tenants rated their current landlord as good or excellent, with just 8% giving a poor rating. It then goes on to say, despite this, 56% of tenants say their landlord should do more to help them. So why they think they're excellent, but they should do more, I'm not quite clear on. But essentially, landlords not so bad after all.
Interesting, it's got the landlord's complaints as well. And 37, the highest percentage of the complaints, landlords were more likely to complain about late rental payments than anything else. That makes sense. And if only they had some sort of comprehensive rental guarantee, Rob.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes sense because that's why when we started Yellow Lettings, we had a rental guarantee as part of what we offer as standard, as part of the price, not anything extra, because it is the number one thing that landlords worry about, and with good reason, because if you don't get your rent in, you can't pay your mortgage and all your other costs. And so it is really important. So it makes sense that this stands out as the number one complaint. And yeah, damage to the property is the number 2 complaint, and that's why it's so important to have an inventory done. And so the landlord complaints all make absolute sense, but there are things that you can do to reduce the risk of these things happening if you use a good agent or if you effectively self-manage. The survey also found that apparently still 1 in 10 landlords aren't using the deposit protection scheme, which is pretty worrying. So I think despite this survey finding out that landlords are, on the whole, pretty good, there are still probably a number of pretty old school people who've been managing their own property for 20 years or something and haven't really kept up with what's going on since then. And that's probably the people who are not providing a great experience. But everyone who we work with and everyone who listens to the podcast, I'm sure, take their responsibilities very seriously and would be part of that excellent category right at the top there.
Well, Rob, this all sounds well and good, but let's face it, the news story isn't why people are here this week. They're not going to get one, but over 20 ways to become a property millionaire. Let's get on it. Should we be going straight to this? What are the 20 ways? Are we all going to get rich?
And why have we waited till episode 89 to unleash these 20 secrets all in one go? Okay. 20 ways to become a property millionaire is the topic of the week. If you end up thinking that the title is in any way misleading, do not blame us. Blame the Daily Telegraph. Because we're taking our topic from a story that they published of the same name. And the reason we're doing it is that in this story, they listed 20 ways to become a property millionaire, they claimed. And it's the kind of advice that you see in the papers all the time. So we thought that this would be a good example to go through point by point, see which bits we agree with and which bits, quite frankly, seem like nonsense. So we're going to go through one by one and see how many of these 20 ways we actually agree with. Let's romp through them, shall we? Rob, start us off.
Okay, to repeat, these are not our 20. So please don't let us lose all our credibility on this one episode. Number 1, target flats rather than houses. So the Telegraph points out that houses are all well and good, but actually the costs of running them can be higher, cost more to buy, and a 2-bed flat over a 2-bed house will give you a better return as well. Is that true? Well, actually, there's some merit to it, but in a different way. Let's face it, better return, who cares if you get an extra 2% off that deal or 4% or whatever? It doesn't matter because you're not going to get rich from rent. So many people get confused by this that they go, oh, I'm going to get wealthy by rent. Well, if you're making £250 a property, how many properties do you have to own before you become a millionaire? It's nonsense. Nobody gets rich through rent. You might become well off, but you're certainly not going to get rich. However, there is some logic in this, but not what the Telegraph's uncovered. The logic is that over the last 10 years, the capital growth on apartments has outperformed houses. And that's where a lot of the wealth will be generated in the growth of the properties. So although they've said target flats and houses for different reasons, the extra rental return, which don't get me wrong, is nice. Actually, there might be some merit in it because over the last decade, apartments, flats have outperformed houses on capital growth. So interesting suggestion. Probably I don't agree with, but if you twist it a bit, I do. But if you're interested in this, go to the propertyhub.net/20 ways, the show notes for this episode. That's the propertyhub.net/20 ways. We're going to link to an episode of the podcast we did, which is episode 61, where we covered flats versus houses. So we go into this a lot more detail, so you can listen to it there.
Yeah, the show notes are going to be well worth checking out this week because a lot of these points we've covered in the past. And so we'll be linking you to the relevant episodes where you can find out more. Okay, number 2, it says be patient. Important to assess all the pros and cons of an investment before jumping in. It says remember that property is a long-term game. And if you want to make money from it, never put yourself in a position where you are forced to sell. Well, I don't know if this would count as a tip to make you a millionaire on its own, but absolutely agree. It is imperative that you never put yourself in a position where you're forced to sell. As we talked about on our episodes about the property cycle, there are good times and the bad times, and you can ride out the bad times. You just need to make sure that you're not forced to sell at exactly the wrong time. And yet, of course, it is important to research all the pros and the cons. And that's why we did an episode all the way back in episode 31, how to research any property investment. So if you missed that, we'll be linking you to that very useful overview of how to actually do that research process that's so important.
Number 3, don't put all your eggs in one basket. There's a lot of advice where people go, oh, buy in your area, focus on your area, and this is what you want to do. I disagree. Rob disagrees. We don't do this. Why? Because if you focus on your area, and let's say your area is Doncaster, and you put all your eggs in that one basket, you invest in Doncaster heavily. If Doncaster does better than everywhere else in the UK, then hip hip hooray, you've made an absolute fortune. Or if Doncaster falls behind everywhere else, then you've cost yourself money. So spread your portfolio across good areas, not just anywhere, don't just pick areas willy-nilly, but spread your portfolio across different areas. So if one area does really well, then great. But equally, if that one area doesn't do well, you've got that property in Doncaster that didn't perform, but don't worry, you've got the other property in Birmingham which has done really well. It balances out. Will this make you a millionaire? No, not on its own, but will it help you offset the risk of the downsides? Absolutely. So good investment advice, not going to get you rich overnight, but something Rob and I definitely follow.
Yes, indeed. Number 4, always look for ways to add value. One of the best ways to make money out of property is to add value to it, the article says. Interesting, because we actually talked about this very recently when we were talking about universal property investment principles. Adding value, actually not imperative depending on your strategy, but it can be a great way to recycle your deposit and build in some equity. So some people always insist on adding value every time. other people don't. So I think it's good advice, but not necessarily something that you have to do. I will say that the example in the article seems a bit weird. It says, for example, consider a maisonette above a shop with potential for a loft conversion. I'm not sure I'd want to own a maisonette above a shop. I'm not sure my lender would be too keen on that either. But in general, looking for ways to add value, solid advice.
Number 5, become tax efficient. Sounds simple, but it's true. So many people pay more tax than they need to. Also, though, a flip side, a lot of people focus on tax before they even got started. You have to earn some income, let the income come in and then address it. Don't get too wrapped up in it early on. However, once you're starting to build that portfolio, becoming tax efficient is very much a good thing. You're giving the money away that you don't have to if you're not. Now, rather than me go on about all the different ways you can be tax efficient, I'm going to link to the propertyhub.net/courses. If you go there, Rob put together a course with Ian Wallace, who's, a tax expert, who covers lots and lots of ways you become more tax efficient. So we'll also link to that in this week's show notes, which are thepropertyhub.net/20 ways.
Now, number 6, exploit local knowledge. This is interesting because it contradicts number 3, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because it says how it sounds obvious, but when buying a property, it's not going to be as easy to spot a bargain thousands of miles away. And that is true. If you are buying close to home, of course it's going to be easier, and you definitely don't want to be rushing blindly into something that you know nothing about when it's at a distance. But this isn't to say that you can't build up that local knowledge, the appropriate level of knowledge, using the research method that we talked to earlier, that we linked to in the show notes, and by building up connections and getting to know the right people. Exploiting local knowledge is all well and good, but I don't think that should be limited to the local knowledge that you have of exactly where you live. You can build up local knowledge of other areas relatively easily by just getting to know the right people and using the right tools.
Number 7, start at home. Interested on this, but I know people who've done similar. If you're nearing retirement age, and I don't think this tip applies to that at all, it can be to anyone. If you live in a tired, run-down family home that's far too big for you, consider breaking it up into 2 or 3 flats. Well, that could be anyway. You don't have to be near retirement. If you're looking to become financially free, then if you live in a big home and you can get the planning split into 2 or 3 flats, if you can keep yourself in a ground floor flat, for example, and then use the rest of the blocks to add to your portfolio, then that might be a way of becoming financially free. But then you've also got the experience to go and do it again in the future. Quite a niche strategy, but I know people who've done similar. Very different and quite time consuming, but might be something worth considering. It could be the start of your portfolio and your construction empire.
Okay, number 8, find professional partners you can trust. Absolutely agree with this. It talks in the article about finding dependable builders, lawyers and accountants. And to that, you could add mortgage broker. You could add property sourcer if you're not going to be doing it on your own. You could probably add other people to that as well. But you definitely want to be working with the right people, because working with the wrong people is a very easy way to be parted from your cash with not a lot to show from it. And working on your own means that you're never going to achieve as much as you could, because you're going to be spending all your time doing all these tasks which someone else will be far more skilled at than you could, leaving you to concentrate on what you're best at. So this is something that a lot of people get wrong, either by rushing into relationships with the wrong people, or having I can do it all myself kind of mentality, trying to save a little bit of money here and there by using up their own time. So it's a common mistake. Getting it right isn't a surefire way to become a property millionaire, but I'd say you're almost certainly not going to accomplish that without working with the right people.
Absolutely. And I know a very good property company and letting agents, Rob. But in all seriousness, I know a lot of people have contacted me, because I mentioned the other week about solicitors and mortgage brokers. So if you are struggling and you do want to be pointed in the right direction, absolutely no financial incentive for me. But if you want me to lead you in the right way, more than happy to email you back with some recommendations. Number 9, is there cash in your attic? Rob touched on this one before, but if you're looking at your main home, there may be cash in the attic. You could do a conversion. Be careful. 2 things. 1, well, clearly it's not going to make you a millionaire, so that's a nonsense. But yes, you might make some money. However, it's not the same in every area. Some areas, the cost of the conversion won't add that much value to the home. In other areas, it will. Do your research. Don't just assume that adding extra space means that you've added value to your home. Research the market, speak to local agents before you go ahead. Might make you extra money, not going to make you a millionaire, not too sure why they put it in here.
And here's another nonsense one. Number 10, take advantage of low mortgage rates. I don't know how you take advantage of low mortgage rates because they might be low now, but that certainly doesn't mean that you want to push yourself to your absolute limit because you can guarantee that they're not going to stay low for the entire time that you're going to be building your property portfolio. You might be able to lock in for 5 years. You could possibly lock in for 10 years, but they're not going to stay low forever. So I'm not entirely sure why this tip is in there. So if mortgage rates are low right now, hooray. But make sure that you're stress testing your investment against a higher payment rate. Of course, as we've talked about recently, though, we've talked about the prospect of interest rates going up, and we've said that actually, as well as the base rate, when it comes to your actual mortgage rate, there are so many other factors as well. So competition between lenders is a big factor. So even if the base rate goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean that mortgage rates are going to be spiking as well. But either way, I think this is a bit of a strange tip. You don't necessarily want to be getting too aggressive now just because times are relatively good.
Number 11, don't turn your nose up at unfashionable suburbs. So it uses a bit of a random example about somebody who bought a flat in Tooting opposite St George's Hospital and they're going to get a 5% yield. Woo. That certainly the 5% yield is not going to make them a millionaire. I think the point of this suggestion/tip is that you can look at areas that aren't particularly, in vogue at the moment, but are close to good areas already. You may see a natural ripple effect. So London, very much seen that. Manchester, there's been a ripple effect there into Greater Manchester. So if there are areas that are very well connected to these trendy areas already, they're probably next in line to see a bit of upward growth. There is some merit to that point, and you might be able to take advantage of that yourself.
I must admit, when I was looking through this article, I actually dug into this because I thought how this example was really bonkers. And so it's talked about someone who bought a one-bedroom flat in Tooting for $320,000 and is expecting to get a rental yield of 5%. And I looked into how much it costs you to rent a one-bedroom flat in Tooting, and it is indeed a gross yield of 5%, optimistically. I mean, maybe this flat is going to have a great capital growth. We mentioned that's where the real money's at, but why he's talking about the yield as if that's a good thing, I don't know. And really, this is one of the key points from going through this article. You often get in the press some pretty solid advice next to something really bizarre. And I think a lot of the time it's probably just people pushing their own agendas rather than anything else.
I wonder what the net yield is on that 0.5%. It's ridiculous. What an awful investment.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Maybe he knows something we don't. But don't focus on a 5% gross yield and sort of mislead people into thinking, oh, but I'm only getting 0.5% in the bank. A 5% gross yield is totally different from a net yield or ROI. Okay. A more sensible one, number 12, think Waitrose. Keep an eye on what Waitrose is doing. If there's a Waitrose scheduled to open nearby, that could mean higher house prices to come. I think this is probably fairly true. Not a guarantee, of course. But when a major supermarket chain is opening a new branch, they will have done their research. They'll have listened to one of our earlier episodes and decided where it's going to be a good place to open. So why not piggyback off that? Obviously, it's not the supermarket itself which is causing the improvement in the local area, but you can be sure that they will have done their research. So the example is Waitrose, but the same could be said for any kind of signs that the fundamentals of an area are shifting. Okay,
number 13, look for young professionals as tenants. So the point of this one is suggesting that they give higher yielding returns than maybe families or so on. Maybe true, maybe not. Again, though, how many rental incomes do you need to become a property millionaire? Quite a few. So yes, having professionals as tenants is quite a good thing, less wear and tear. It's something that I focus on. I suppose what you could say is a lot of these points are pieces of the jigsaw. Not one is the secret way, the secret source of doing it. And that's what we said, the headline's quite sensationalist. But if you are going to take things on this article, just take bits, because some of these points, not all as we've said, but some of these points are quite good advice. If you take bits of it, it can all help to improve the portfolio overall. And targeting professionals, yeah, I think that's pretty solid. It's something I do and it's worked well for me.
Okay, we're on number 14. If you're getting exhausted, don't worry. We can probably get through these next few quite quickly because we're coming up to some really mental ones. This one, don't trust estate agents' estimates of rental yields. I think this is actually absolutely true. You do not want to be relying on what an estate agent tells you can achieve in terms of rent, because when I'm doing viewings, I'll often ask an agent, even though I'll know what the property would achieve in terms of rent, just because I want to see if they know and how honest/accurate they're going to be. You don't want to be relying on what they say when it's so easy to find out for yourself. But the example in the article is that central London has poor yields, so you might want to try outer prime areas like Fulham and the City. So, I don't know. This is just, I don't know if they're aware that there is life outside Zone 2. But the actual headline does actually make sense. If you're looking to buy, do not trust what the estate agent has to say in terms of rental yields, because firstly, it's not their area of expertise. And secondly, they just want you to buy the place.
Okay, so when the journalists started writing this article, they might have been sipping on some wine. And the wine is really kicking in now on point 15. French properties in the doldrums. Vive la France. So buy in France, do up a rundown farmhouse in the countryside, turn it into a holiday home with all the mod cons, swimming pool, wait till a good time to sell, and you could double your money in 5 years. Oh my word, please. I hope no one is following the advice of this. Could, just because it's down in the article. I wonder if people actually follow this. There's absolutely zero guarantees. Could be 50 years, could be 5, could be 2. They don't know. We don't know. I hope nobody follows that advice.
And the tax regime isn't a lot of fun either. Sorry, go on, Rob.
No. And Rob, the photo they've used, I think they've just Googled holiday home, because that is, I'm sure, a development in Camber Sands, not France. I've been there. Yeah, the journalist has got particularly lazy at this point.
And it gets worse. Number 16, check out property investment funds. But then it's not really talking about funds. It's talking about, seems to be buying a timeshare. I don't know what this is all about. I think we can skip straight over that one.
Okay. Could Jersey be a cash cow? Yes, you could invest in Jersey, but it's not very easy to do. You're probably not going to have many mortgage options. The reason why? Well, Jersey is just like the UK. It's a lot of people, not a lot of space. Just Jersey's just a much smaller version of it. So that supply and demand issues occur there too. So there is some merit, but you can achieve that in the UK already.
Okay, and now we're coming back to reality. Number 18, become a train spotter. Talking about improvements in rail links affecting house prices. And this is indeed absolutely true. It says that there's no good waiting for the station to be built. You need to stay ahead of the game and know what's coming. And that's true. But the funny thing is, or what I found strange, is that you don't need to jump on something the minute that a project is approved. So like Crossrail, for example, everyone's known about for years. And yet it's only really in the last couple of years where we've seen Crossrail having an effect on house prices in areas along the route. So it's not like with the stock market where the minute something is announced, the news is priced in from that point forwards. You don't have to be absolutely on top of things. So you can be looking at what's coming down the track in terms of rail links and indeed anything else. But it's what we talked about earlier as well. Those fundamentals, the changing fundamentals of an area. What signs are there that somewhere is going to become a more desirable place to live? And because transport is so important, that's obviously going to be a big component of it.
Okay, so shifting gear. Follow trends in planning approvals. Actually, this could be reworded. Look for investments. Look for regeneration. Absolutely. If you can find areas that are having lots of money spent on it, Hull is a prime example at the moment, then that area can really improve. Liverpool is a past example of it. Liverpool dramatically improved over the last 2 decades. Literally billions of pounds have been poured into it. And Liverpool's become a really, really nice city centre now and a nice area. It used to be a little bit tired. I can say that. I'm from there. The money that's gone into there has really transformed it. So look for areas that are improving. Look for areas where money's being spent. And you may find an area that increases in value.
And finally, number 20, remember the growth potential in gardens. Research shows that properties with some kind of outdoor space are worth 20% more than properties without such a space. Yes, but they will probably cost you that much more to buy as well. So I'm not sure there's a big payoff there, but it is certainly true to say that if you can buy properties that have got some kind of unique, desirable feature, then they're always going to be more rentable than somewhere without. So that's possibly something to look at. So that is the 20 from the Telegraph article, but we're on a roll and there's a few things that they've not mentioned. So why not add a few of our own?
Yeah, I think of the 20, as I said, lots of jigsaw pieces that will help you. But I don't think there was one way there to become a property millionaire. So let's give you some actual ways of doing it. Warning, there is no get-rich technique, but you can do it. Buy, hold, then sell. If you build a property portfolio over time that's worth $1 million, and say you have mortgages of 700,000 on those properties, once the property goes through a cycle, say that takes the average 9 years, it will then be worth $2 million. and you'll have mortgages of 700. Hey, you're a property millionaire. Yes, I know that's really simple, but that actually that should be a point. Very simple strategy, very simple way of going about it. And then if you liquidate and you've got a good accountant, you still should have $1 million left. There you go. There's an actual way of becoming a property millionaire.
And another way which I've seen people doing, and I think perhaps to counterbalance the article, or to be fair, like the article is never saying that you should do all 20 of these things. And when you're jumping around from central London to a farmhouse in France and all this kind of thing, it can make it look really scattered. And no one's saying that you should do all these things. And there is a lot of power in focus. And so what you see people do, we talked about spreading your bets. But you see a lot of people who just find something that works and they just do it and do it and do it. They'll find a little niche. They'll find a particular type of investment that works. They'll go in. They'll be able to price up the work that needs doing, do the work, pull their money out, do it all again. And you'll see people who just do this over and over again for years, and they'll come out of it very nicely indeed, not having to put in much of their own money beyond what they invested in the first place. So if that is your approach, that kind of focus can work really nicely. And if you have found something that works, don't feel like because people are talking about all these other types of investments, you have to go off and do all of them. You can just find what works for you. And that is not something that's easy to do. It's not something that you can read in a newspaper and go out and implement the next day, but it can be done.
Okay, another way is the ultimate property strategy. Rob and I have put the course together. It is actually the last course that's yet to go free, and it will. Don't worry, we're not holding it back because I know it's priced up, I think, at £300 at the moment. That course will be coming free in January, so don't buy it. Wait, and in January it will go free. When it does, I think you'll be very, very impressed of a very efficient way of approaching your property portfolio. It's something I teach at RMP Property, and that's what I take them through there. But I'm going to give away the secret sauce in January, and we're going to do a podcast on it too. We're going to do a podcast on it and release that to the wider general public in January. But that certainly is a way of getting to property wealth too. I repeat, it's not get rich quick. But like the first point, buy, hold, and sell, it is a way of achieving it.
And finally, understand the 18-year property cycle. So we did 2 episodes on this. We're going to link to both of them in the show notes for this episode, which again are at thepropertyhub.net/20ways. And this is a really important part of the whole thing, because if you are going and you're buying overpriced assets at the absolute peak, and then next year everything crashes by 30%, it's going to be a lot harder to become a property millionaire. Because first of all, you have to not get everything taken away from you. And then you have to get all the way back up to zero. If you're buying the right assets at the right time, and you're even strategically selling them at the right time, then your chances are going to be a lot higher. So the 18-year cycle is something that you'll understand if you listen to the episode, that it's not like there's some magic formula that's going to solve everything for you. You're going to be able to mark a date in your calendar about when things are going to happen. But it is a very powerful thing, and a surprisingly small number of people seem to know it or be talking about it. Maybe the people who do know about it are keeping it to themselves. I don't know, but we're not. And so we've done a couple of episodes which are well worth checking out, because if you can keep that in mind as a framework that guides everything else that you do, then it just means that all the other decisions you make are going to be a lot more effective. Okay.
Woo. That's 20 plus ways to become a property millionaire. Wow. Lots and lots in there. Rob, this will turn into a long episode if we carry on for too much longer. So let's get straight into the resource of the week. And I've had a little look. It looks quite interesting.
Yeah, so this is one that I've dug out, or rather it's a couple, because it's another of those browser extensions, another of those handy little bits of software that you add into whatever browser you use, whether it's Chrome or Firefox or something else, and it gives it extra functionality. In this case, there are a couple of plugins that I use to allow you to download video that's embedded online. So for example, on YouTube or other sites like that. And so normally on YouTube, you can just watch a video, you can stream it, but then if you're offline, then you're not able to watch it. So what I find useful is to download those videos. So when I don't have an internet connection, so maybe I'm on a flight or a train or something, I can watch those videos offline, because often during my normal day, I don't have the time to watch those videos. And there's lots of really useful content on there. So in the show notes at thepropertyhub.net/20ways, link to a couple, one for Chrome and one for Firefox. If you use a different browser, then just have a little Google for Flash Video Downloader, would be the terms to use, and see if you can find one for your browser as well. But I think it's worth checking out because it just used to happen to me so many times when I wanted to watch a video where I didn't have an internet connection. And then I discovered how to do it, and it's really useful.
Fantastic. Go check it out. It's free, looks really interesting, and it's another great Chrome extension. If you're not using Chrome already, why not? Okay, a big round of applause for the following. Our review this week comes from Waggers100, and he says, or she says, outstanding. Without doubt, the best property investment podcast currently available. Succinct, informative, and relative. Rob and Rob use their natural chemistry to impart advice in an informal manner that enables the listener to absorb the wealth of information their podcast contains. A comprehensive back catalogue now complements the current podcasts, where recent changes to legislation are discussed and explained in an easy-to-understand format. A welcome addition to the property investor advice arsenal that should be viewed as essential listening to anyone who is serious about investing in property as either a starter or a seasoned investor. Well, thank you, Waggers100. We greatly appreciate it. And if you are listening and you're enjoying the show and taking lots from it, an awesome way to say thank you is leave us a review in iTunes, and the property investment tips reviews there are greatly appreciated too if you're enjoying that as well.
Yeah, so that is us for this week. There's a lot in there. I hope you took something away from it. Do check out the show notes at thepropertyhub.net/20ways, because we do have quite a back catalogue now, and there are lots of episodes that tie into some of the ideas that we've talked about, which we're going to link to make it easier for you to find. And if you've got any thoughts on this week's episode, if there are any points maybe that we poo-pooed that you think that there is actually some merit behind, or if you've got your own ideas about how to become a property millionaire that you feel like sharing, there'll be a link in the show notes over to a topic in the Property Hub where we're discussing this episode, and we would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, that's us for another week. Thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to be back with you next Thursday with more free property education for Rob and I. But until then, everyone, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves the more than air miles.